Okay, good morning. Let's sing another verse of the servant song, I Will Weep When You Are Weeping, and then I'll tell you more about Palm Sunday. I will weep when you are weeping, when you laugh, I'll laugh with you, and I will share your joy and sorrow till we've seen this journey through. Yesterday we got to talk a little bit about Palm Sunday and the two parades that happen and the ways in which we choose to walk in the world. Do we walk in a way where we try to make others afraid of us, where we are pompous and grand, or do we choose to just walk as we are, confident that the battle has already been won by God? This is a great way to think about this. Are we fighting for our worth? Are we fighting to make other people think we're important? Or do we accept that God has already done that for us, that we are lovable just like we are? I want to suggest to you that's one of those great opportunities of Palm Sunday we get to live into. And I want to tell you there's a great way to hear Palm Sunday, which is that we are invited by God to just be authentic, to be who we are and not be pompous or great, and to treat other people like they are, and especially when somebody is different. And Jesus is going to do a lot of things during Holy Week that seem really different. Instead of being afraid or mad or angry, to trust and think hard and to appreciate how we can be different. Well, here is a picture behind me. You're seeing two pictures of the city of Jerusalem. These actually are models, and they're from Jerusalem. A group of us at St. Thomas took a trip recently, about 2.5 years ago. We went to Jerusalem, and there's this great model of what the city looked like when Jesus went there. And I want you to see, this is where Jesus went when he first came. This is the temple at Jerusalem. This is where all Jewish people at the time had to come and worship God. And this is why there were so many people there, because especially once a year during Passover, they were supposed to come. It's hard to tell how big this is, but here is the temple, and on either side you will see something that is about the size of a whole football field. Imagine that, a football field on either side, and this is just a big platform. Jesus came on the donkey, coming down here, this from top of a mountain. This is a place called the Mount of Olives. He came down through this valley called the Kidron Valley, and he came up into the temple and had a look around. Over here, this is the fortress here. This is the military fortress. This is where Pontius Pilate came in his procession. He came with chariots and, as I mentioned, maybe an elephant or two, and he came through the wide, grand street, coming through here to show this big display. So they were coming almost to the same place. Pilate came to the fortress, Jesus came to the temple, and we think he came in the temple through this gate right here. It's called the Golden Gate. It was a very special entrance. Very few people used it, and sure enough, there probably were guards all around the top of this temple wall, and this was connected to the fortress, and they probably noticed, look, there's people throwing their capes down, there's people putting down palm branches, there's this guy riding on a donkey, and that's probably when the government said, hey, this is somebody we need to watch, because the people are really spending a lot of time with him. They're showing him a lot of respect. Maybe he's up to no good. Remember, when you get a lot of people together, sometimes they do things they wouldn't normally do, like have riots. And so that's what the soldiers were worried about. Well, it's Palm Sunday. Jesus comes up here and has a look. These football fields, they weren't used for soccer games or Quidditch or anything of the kind. They were used just like huge shopping malls. Now, there weren't stores there like Gucci or Gap or even a Lego store. This was more like a farmer's market, but a huge, giant one that also sold things like clothes and shoes. Imagine going to a farmer's market that's the size of 2 football fields, where people are selling all kinds of things. Jesus goes to the temple to see the place where they thought God lived. He sees all of this shopping, and then he does something even more shocking. I'm going to show you a coin that I'm sure you all recognize. This is a quarter. And do you know whose picture that is? That is George Washington there on the quarter. Now, we are used to putting past presidents on our coins, but when Jesus was around, it was against Jewish law to have pictures of people on money. And it especially was against Jewish law to have any pictures of people or animals in the temple. Remember when Moses came down from the mountain, one of the 10 words is you cannot have graven images. You can't worship things that are already created. You're supposed to worship the Creator, so you can't make pictures of God. Well, the Romans, they decided that their rulers, their emperors, they were called the Caesars. Some of the Caesars said that they were gods, and they put their pictures on the money. And the Caesar, when Jesus was around, was called Tiberius. The Caesar before him was called Augustus, which means a god made manifest. So the Romans worshiped their rulers like they were gods, put them on the money, and the Jews at the time, especially the people here in the temple, said, you cannot bring that money into the temple. It offends God for people to call themselves gods. There's no God but one God. No pictures of people. So if you want to sell stuff up here, you can't bring regular coins. You have to have money with no pictures. Well, right down here, and you'll see it, there's this little tiny looking platform here. This is where anybody who wanted to buy or sell things up in the temple, they had to trade in their money that they were used to. The money that had pictures of emperors, of Caesars, of governors, even pictures of things like lions or bears. They had to come here and change their money to get solid silver coins, no pictures on it, and they would use that money up here. And whatever money they had left, let's pretend they had too many silver coins, they just have to change it back down here. Well, Jesus comes up on Palm Sunday, looks around, then he goes down here to the money changers and he flips over their tables and says, my Father's house is supposed to be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. It would have been quite a spectacle for somebody to flip over tables. Some of the stories say he comes up here and flips over tables as well. You have to know, this is so big, there's no way Jesus flipped over all the tables. The soldiers would have seen this. They would have really paid attention. Look, not only has this guy come in with palms on a donkey, but now he's flipping stuff over. And what does he mean anyway? Well, there's an this is really good to know about what's happening on Palm Sunday. When people had to pay the government taxes, we still have to do this today. It turns out that if you lived in this area, all of your tax records were kept in the temple building. So Jesus is kind of saying, look, the temple is supposed to be a place where you worship God, but instead it's become a place where you are worshiping the Caesars. It's a place where you're worshiping money and power and people, and you're worshiping people who come in on chariots, who come up in being pompous and being grand. It's not a place where you're worshiping God. You're doing this wrong. It's supposed to be a place where people can come and be themselves. It's supposed to be a place where you don't have idols and unholy images, but instead you're keeping debt records there. You're keeping things that are keeping people poor and keeping people in slavery in God's very house. The people who are changing the money, they were helping you be able to come in and do business, but they were also making money themselves doing that because they didn't change the money for free. Jesus is saying that we have these holy places, churches, mosques, synagogues, temples. They're supposed to be extraordinary. They're supposed to be places where you come in and you don't have to worry about whether you fit in because of how you dress or how you talk or how you pray. These are supposed to be places where you come in and you belong. Belonging is different from fitting in, because belonging is where you get to be exactly who you are, and fitting in is where you have to be what somebody else tells you in order to come. Jesus flips over the fitting in tables. Jesus flips over taking places that are meant to be belonging and turning them into places where you have to be something other than yourself. Jesus comes in and says, hey, this temple is not here to make some people rich and powerful. This temple is here to remind us that God lives with us, inside of us. And God asks us to respect one another, because when we respect each other, we're actually respecting God. So Jesus gets a little bit riled up today on Palm Sunday. He says, y'all who are doing this, get out of here. No more taking God's house, which is supposed to be extraordinary, and making it really, really ordinary. And this is a great reminder for us. We can practice Palm Sunday with the way we treat each other at home, on the computer. When we treat each other like we're extraordinary, that's what Jesus has in mind. That's how we make wherever place we live a house of prayer for all nations. But when you say, nope, I don't like your opinion, I disagree, you're wrong, you're no good, you don't look like me, you don't talk like me. When we do that, that's when we make temples to ourselves. The Romans are paying a lot of attention. You're going to hear more and more about the Romans, because those are the people who are going to take Jesus' life. They're listening to what he says, and they don't like it. They don't like it because they like being in charge and in power and telling other people what to do. And Jesus is threatening all of that today by saying, look, you're living by the wrong rules. You need to change the rules. Think about the rules you live by. Think about whether or not they are making new friends or they're keeping people away. Think about whether or not God likes the same people you do. There's this really great writer who says, we know we've done religion wrong when God hates the same people we do. Palm Sunday is this great reminder that God loves everybody, especially when we don't. And that we need to flip over the tables that separate us from other people. That's what God is trying to do for us, is flip over tables so that we love people more, not less. Okay, let's sing the next verse of the servant song. When we sing to God in heaven, we shall find such harmony. Born of all we've known together, of Christ's love and agony. Won't you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. Pray